comments, and questions. When you speak, please provide your name and address for the recording in the minutes. All comments should be directed to myself, the chair of the meeting. The applicant will be provided the opportunity to address public questions once all members of the public have made their submissions. For the applications being presented tonight, a report and recommendation will be presented to council at a later date. Following your council decision, notice will be circulated in accordance with the Planning Act. If a person or public body would have an ability to appeal the decision of the council to the Ontario Land Tribunal, but the person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the township before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision. Okay, so first item is D14 2022-015 333 Clark Drive. So Madam Planner, do you wish to present that, put that on the floor?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, this is an application for a zoning bylaw amendment to rezone the property at 333 Clark Drive. Previously, this property has been subject to an application for consent, as well as council approval for access to the property from the end of Clark Drive. I'm just going to share my screen. The purpose of this application for zoning bylaw amendment is to rezone the property that's outlined in red for two different reasons. The first being to allow a boathouse that's greater in size than what the zoning bylaw would permit. And the second is to rezone areas of cultural heritage significance that have been identified on the property. I'm sharing the site plan for the property. The areas outlined in orange will be protected, so there shall be no disturbance or development within those areas, and you can see the location of the boathouse along the frontage of the property. Notice for this meeting was advertised in accordance with the Planning Act to all property owners within 120 meters of the property. I would note that there was an item of correspondence received this afternoon that was distributed to council with some questions with respect to the size and scale of the boathouse. Just for clarification, both of the applications that are on for public meeting this evening are not on for recommendation to council tonight. It simply reports to gather public input with respect to the applications. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Madam Planner. Do any members of council have questions for the planner in regards to this application? I have Deputy Mayor Olkey and then Councillor Fody.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, Madam Planner, what specifically are the items of archaeological interest there?
Through Your Worship, we can't speak specifically to what the items of archaeological interest are, other than they've been identified as areas that should be protected.
I could not really hear that. It was distorted.
It's basically, she said that they couldn't speak specifically to what has gone on there, but that they're being protected for future endeavors. Councillor Fody.
Excuse me. Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the planner. Just for clarity, the length and width dimensions, is that length from the shoreline out? I tried to zoom in on it when I was at home there, but didn't get a lot of clarity.
So through Your Worship, the length of the boathouse that extends out from the shore is 54 feet and the width is 46 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions from council members? Go ahead, Councillor Grom.
Thank you, and through you, Your Worship. When this comes before council, will this first go before the Committee of Adjustment for the sizing of the potential boathouse?
Through Your Worship, no, this is an application for zoning bylaw amendment. This is not an application for minor variance. So with respect to the size and scale of the boathouse, this is being brought forward to council because there was the opinion of staff that this is not a minor variance and does not meet the intent of the zoning bylaw. So it's not, because of the size of it being that much larger than what is permitted, it doesn't qualify as a minor variance. The zoning bylaw amendment is the appropriate process for this to go through.
So it, just for clarification,
Yeah.
it is not a minor variance. It's not considered a minor variance. It is considered something greater. Therefore, it comes before council to determine whether we allow the sizing. Is that what I'm led to believe?
That's correct. So a minor variance is subject to 4 tests as set out in the Planning Act. One being the tests are, does it meet the intent of the official plan? Does it meet the intent of the zoning bylaw? Is it appropriate and desirable development? And is it minor? And in looking at the proposed size and scale of the boathouse, it was the opinion of staff that it doesn't meet the tests and that a zoning amendment is the appropriate mechanism for this to come forward for council to consider it because it's greater than what a minor variance should be.
And one last question. When I was looking through the material, I noticed that they left out any elevation of the potential boathouse. They had plan view, but they had no, I know we're just looking into this at this point and the public gets to chat, but are there any elevations given for this boathouse?
Just one moment. Let me.
I didn't see any in the material, Marnie. I just wanted.
No, I don't believe there are any, but there is no request to allow for a sun deck on any roof structures as it relates to this. I'm just double checking.
I'm sorry, you're really broken up. Can you say that again, please?
Sorry, I'm just double checking the file to ensure that we don't have any, but it's my understanding that I think this is a peaked roof, but I don't have a specific elevation that I can reference.
And did you further say that it is not in the plan or it will be made clear when our report comes to council? It will be made clear what the elevation suggestion on this house size boathouse will be?
We can verify that when it comes forward with a recommendation. We can speak to the applicant about it. There are no elevations provided in the package that we have.
All right, the reason I asked, everything was labeled preliminary. I just want, so the public would have a hard time commenting on something that is designated as preliminary on, and I didn't see anything that suggested otherwise, and therefore the public would go, well, we're looking at a house-sized boathouse measuring 46 by 54 feet with very little real information. I just wondered if that's appropriate. I realize it's only a public meeting today, but maybe the public would be interested in the size of this thing. Thank you.
Okay, so that is something that we can ask if the applicants or their representatives are on the call. So I'll go to Councillor Maybe and then make those questions at the end.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you, similar to what Councillor Gorell said, but I'm interested in how it's actually being placed on the property, whether it's going to have cribbing or a post driven or it's a floating structure. And to that point, how high is it? And that in the information, it did indicate that it wasn't meant to be for a patio. It did say that in one sentence. So I'm just reiterating that happened, but there are some questions about the actual design and what it's going to entail in structure. You know, it shows a footprint of a certain size, but there's still a lot of questions in its design. Thank you.
Councillor Foti, follow up?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, through you. Along the same line of questioning, I would like some clarity on the actual wall height of this boathouse. I'd again like clarity on the actual maximum roof height of this boathouse. I would like to know whether it's flat topped or peaked. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions from council members? Okay, so go ahead, Madam Planner.
Thank you. Through you, just for clarification with respect to the information that's been provided, adequate information has been provided with the plans for us to verify the area, perimeter, and length of the proposed facility. The height, there's no relief being requested for the height of the structure, so it would be within the requirements of the zoning bylaw. I would note that the agent for the applicant is on the line and may be able to answer some more specific questions with respect to the design.
Okay. So I guess at this point in time, we'll ask for the agent to speak to the questions in regards to elevation, flat roof versus pitched roof, wall and roof height, if that is possible. Tracy Zander being the planner. Okay, go ahead.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. Can you hear me okay?
We sure can. Thank you.
Terrific. I do have a short PowerPoint presentation. It mostly duplicates the slides that Marnie has already had, but I'm happy to share that if you would like to see that, and do my best to answer some questions. And Mr. and Mrs. Gosselin, I think, are in the council chambers with you this evening and can also answer questions. But
They've just waved at me. So if you'd like to go through your slides just for further clarity, it might help answer some of the questions.
thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not sure who has control or can give me the ability to share my screen.
She's just trying to figure that out right at the moment.
If not, I'll just speak to the slides.
I
Okay,
think
let's
she
see.
just promoted you to a panelist. So you just got promoted in the Zoom meeting, which means I think we can move to allowing you to share your slides.
Very
There
good.
we go.
Okay, so there's me. And now let's see if I can share my screen. Share screen.
There we go.
There we go. Does that work?
Yep, we can see that here.
Terrific. Thank you for your patience. Okay, so that's the cover slide, just describing the property, 333 Clark Drive. Let's see. There we go. So the property, as I'm sure you all know, between County Road 2 and the St. Lawrence River, it's the remnant or retained property from a severance that I helped the Gosselins with in 2021. It's a big piece of property, about 64 acres, has over 100 meters of frontage on County Road 2, but more importantly, because we're talking about a boathouse, it has about 467 meters of frontage along the St. Lawrence River. The property has a couple of cabins on it, and it did have a boathouse, which has now been removed. And the Gosselins intend to construct a dwelling on the property. So here's an air photo. I have another one where we'll zoom in a bit more, but just to give you the context, and you can see the Clark Drive enters the property from the left-hand side of your screen, if you will, quite close down by the water. So that will be the access for the future development of the property. And you can see kind of an erratic shoreline. So on a future slide in a moment, I'll just show you where the development will be. Properties in the rural residential zone in your zoning bylaw. The goal, as you've heard from your planner, would be to put this in a special exception zone. So this is not a minor variance that would go to your committee. This is a zoning amendment, create a special exception zone. The goal being to permit the oversized marine facility. And as you have heard, there are some cultural heritage resources on the site. Those are kind of protected because they are of cultural heritage significance. So you can see them on the figure, but I can't really share much information about what the significance of those are. But the intent is to protect those, and you'll see a slide in a moment. The marine facility and the docking that's associated with it, as you saw in the figure, is about 237 square meters, and it is replacing a previous marine facility, which was removed. It was damaged in a storm, and so for safety reasons, the Gosselins did remove that. The marine facility that has been designed, again, Mr. Gosselin can give you a bit more about his future use, but it's intended to accommodate a long boat and some personal watercraft that are of a common size on this big water body, and with docking and safe docking and access around the boats in the structure and docking around the edges. The marine facility area, the boathouse area, is in a kind of sheltered bay. You'll see on the next slide, kind of not projecting straight out into the river. And the zoning, as I said, would recognize the cultural heritage area. So this is kind of the bottom end of that air photo. I've just crudely circled in blue where the marine facility was now removed, but that is the same location where the new facility would go. So you can see it's kind of in a bay area. The Gosselin's shoreline is kind of erratic and dips in a bit. So the area of this marine facility is not projecting straight out into the river. It's kind of tucked into a bay. It's quite far from both side lot lines. And so it's in kind of a secluded location there. And then this is the slide that your planner had up previously. So if you can see, the boathouse is just on the point there, kind of pointing into the bay. The orange areas are the archaeological significant areas that would be protected in the zoning amendment. And you can see where the house is proposed to be built. So it's the future development, including the marine facility and the house, are both completely outside of the cultural heritage areas. That's the location of the boathouse. So it's quite far from the side lot lines. My office prepared the planning rationale. There was an environmental impact study done. There was actually two done. One was done to support the severance application, which looked at the whole property for woodland, watercourses, and other natural features. And then an addendum was done to that specifically for the boathouse, which obviously is in the water. So the EIS addendum assessed the kind of fish habitat and water body impacts and concluded that there were no impacts anticipated from this boathouse proposal. And that report was accepted by the Conservation Authority. And then Matrix Heritage did the archaeological study to support the proposal. So the properties in the rural designation in your official plan, marine facilities are permitted as accessory uses to residential uses. And the EIS, as I mentioned, was done to evaluate the shoreline because of the environmental protection designation. As you well know, you have compatibility and built form policies in your official plan that look at landscaping and lighting and impacts on abutting lots. I'm happy to speak to that if you want more information, but it is in my planning report that was in your agenda package. So the zoning amendment is proposed to create a rural residential exception zone. And the marine facility, as I mentioned, does exceed the maximum that's permitted in your zoning bylaw. So one of the councillors mentioned there was no building plans. I have seen some earlier renderings. Mr. Gosling can speak more if you'd like him to, but my understanding is it is intended to have a flat roof. But I think the reason for that is to keep the profile low so that it's not a large mass and kind of overshadowing the shoreline. I'm going to suggest Mr. Gosling's probably a little flexible on that. If you wanted it to have a bit of a peaked roof to avoid the use of the roof for amenity space, that is not their intention. And as your planner has indicated, there's been no request for using rooftop amenity space. The draft design I have seen is a flat roof. The height is, I believe, 4.5 meters for the structure. So again, as your planner indicated, there's no intention to exceed the maximum height in your zoning bylaw, and that hasn't been requested in this site-specific zone. And the side yard setback for the marine facility in your bylaw, I think, is 4.6 meters. So this proposal far exceeds that side yard setback, as you saw on the figure. It's about 50 meters on one side and well over 100 meters on the other side. And again, no rooftop amenity space is proposed. So kind of summarizing, a site-specific zone to permit the oversized marine facility and protect those archaeological significant areas. And the supporting studies have shown no negative impacts are anticipated. This is a big waterfront lot with a lot of shoreline. The marine facility is in kind of an isolated, or not isolated, but a kind of sheltered bay area, not projecting out into the river, and would replace a previous marine facility in the same location. So, that's my summary, Madam Mayor, and I'm happy to answer questions. And as you can see, the Goslins are there as well. Thank you.
I think it might be best if the Goslins speak to the actual structure and height and elevations, just to have that clarity before we take any further questions. If you'd like to come to the podium and speak to the actual boathouse, if you don't mind. Thank you.
So the intent, as Tracy pointed out, was to keep the height as low as we can, so that from our perspective, we're not looking from our house at a boathouse, but that rather we'd be looking out onto the river, which is what our intention is. So we would like to keep it as low as possible. We do understand that there could be some concerns of rooftop usage. And so, as Tracy mentioned, if us putting a slight slope on the roof alleviated any of those concerns, we'd be willing to do it. Our first intention would be to have no slope so that it is as low as we can possibly make it. The size of the boathouse was originally larger. As it was designed by the dock builder and architect to house a 35-foot boat and personal watercraft. We had a meeting with 2 people from the town and 2 people from CRCA in the fall who expressed some concerns about that, requested some reductions in size, which we went back to the engineers and dock builders, concluded that we could make it still work with some customization of the lift, and went back and agreed to the reductions in size that were requested in the fall. And that's what we've now presented here.
Great, thank you. Further questions for Mr. Gosselin? Go ahead, Mr. Maybe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, to Mr. Gosselin. Your footprint and how the boathouse is going to sit in the water, is it on cribs or pile drive, or is it a floating structure?
It will be pile drives.
Okay. And secondly, as a follow-up, your slope, if it was facing to the west and a low grade slope, it would also help with the water runoff off a flat roof. Flat roofs are notorious for leaking over the years. So a slight slope to the west, which would put it on the riverside, might be an advantage for you in the future anyways. So, and also settle some of our concerns. Thank
The
you.
boathouse that we have at our current property has a very slight slope to it. So we certainly would be willing to look at that.
Okay. Further questions for the applicant? Go ahead, Councillor Foti.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just an afterthought. I assume, excuse me, I assume access to the boathouse is perpendicular to the shoreline.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Any further comments or questions? Okay, I think that's everything. Thank you. So seeing there's no further comments or questions, go ahead, Councillor Guerrero. For planning? Okay, go ahead.
Through your worship, and to planning, Marnie, if you're there. If in the future, when this comes before council, are we allowed to put conditionality on it? Because it's easy to speak of how things propose, but they can change, as I've seen over and over and over. So when things are brought and the report comes before council for approvals for this boathouse sizing, are we allowed to put in conditionality for items that we think are important that become legally binding? Thank you.
Go ahead, Madam
Through
Clerk.
your worship, only as it relates to the provisions of the zoning bylaw, because the zoning cannot be conditional. We also cannot require site plan control approval. So we can require what's being asked for is relief to area, perimeter, and depth to recognize the geometry of the boathouse. We can only include provisions with respect to that. It's difficult to say that we can include provisions to dictate architectural design because the bylaw regulates form.
So, excuse me, I'll just a really quick follow-up. So we could ask that some architectural feature be included in the design? Is that what I'm hearing?
No.
You say? Or we cannot?
No, we cannot dictate architecture.
So just again, one last quick question. What protection does the township have that says if we were to approve a certain construction, if we're seeing pictures of something and then someone does not follow through, is there any protection, or what is the position of a planning department in a municipality such as ours? Thank you.
Through your worship, so the zoning bylaw dictates form and function. So land use, so the use is a boathouse, and the form of it would be limited to the size and dimension parameters that are in the zoning. In terms of dictating architecture, finishes, and specific features, we do not have the authority to dictate those through zoning. We could include a provision that the rooftop shall not be used for amenity space, but we cannot dictate that. I mean, if the applicant is accepting of a provision that says that the roof shall be peaked, that's one thing, but that's dictating architectural form, which you can't do through zoning.
So this does leave me confused. I use the word conditionality, maybe incorrectly. You're using a different word. Does either of those, can they be made to hold legally? Or can someone a year from now or, down the road, just ignore all of that and go ahead and do something different?
So just for clarification, basically through zoning, we're approving a box. You can have this height, you can have this width, you can have this depth, you can have this area. And as long as you build within that box, it can be smaller, it can be slightly different, but as long as you're within that box, then you're okay to go ahead. So we can't say that you're going to get a boathouse with cedar shake siding and a specific type of door or anything like that, or a specific roof. As long as it meets the height, the setbacks, and the parameters of that box that's created through the zoning, that's what we can regulate through zoning.
How does it read? I'm sorry to beat this to death, but I'm going to. How does it then read that we're allowing a much larger, and that doesn't really concern me the size, but we're asking, or they're asking two things. One, for the zoning amendment, and B, to build a fairly large structure, given the average size of a boat on the St. Lawrence River, which is spurious anyway. What protections or what can we do to ensure that what council would think they would be approving is indeed, if we don't have any control? I find it hard to believe there can't be, and again, I'll use the word conditionality. If all we can do is say, yeah, you can build it that size, I could say, no, you can't. How about, we could get challenged by this, and I could simply turn around and say, no, I'm not going to give you a boathouse that's X square feet, because you won't guarantee that something. I find this very interesting because of what has happened previously with the Committee of Adjustment, and then this coming to council with these requests for rezoning for uses that are unpermitted in our zoning bylaw. But we don't ever seem to have the power to make these things work. And I'm very confused by that. And we'll be addressing that later this evening, of course, but I would just, and again, I don't mean to single this out too badly, but unfortunately I am. It's nothing personal here. I'm just curious what the township has for power. And it seems we don't have any. I mean, one time we were arguing about, does the railing on does it reduce the height of the building? In other words, if you're going for 4 meters or something for 14 feet. Well, if someone said they want to put a 3-foot, 42-inch railing on that, does that reduce the overall height of thing? These are the things we got right into the weeds on that, but it seemed important at the time. So thank you for your indulgence of your time. Thank you.
Okay, so we have another item on the public meeting agenda. Sorry, we have.
Okay,
Marnie.
no, that's fine.
Is that okay?
It's fine, yeah.
Okay, so we have 2 more items on the agenda. So we've actually dealt with 3.1 and 3.2 in the same SWAT, unless there's any further questions about all of the material that was reviewed by the planner. So we'll move forward with 3.3 and 3.4. So D14 2023-001 902 Jibway Lane and planning report SR-034-23, also in regards to the application for zoning amendment for 902 Jibway Lane. Madam Planner.
Thank you. Through your worship, just let me share my screen. So this is an application for zoning bylaw amendment for 902 Jibway Lane. The property is zoned a site-specific shoreline residential zone. The reason for that site-specific zone was to require a specific setback for a septic system on the property in line with the provisions for Elston Lake. So it required a setback of 250 meters. In preparing to build on the property, the owner had identified that that setback is not feasible because of the topography of the property and the proposed location. So in support of the application to reduce that setback, the owner has prepared an engineering study or submitted an engineering study, as well as a planning justification looking at the specific topography of the property and providing a technical rationale in terms of why it's not feasible to locate the septic system at the distance that was originally required through zoning. We have circulated all of the details with respect to the application to the Ministry of Environment, as well as notice was sent out to all public landowners or all landowners within 120 meters of the property. I would note that 7 letters have been submitted in support of the application. Those were distributed to council earlier today, and one was submitted later in the afternoon. Aside from that, there's been no other public input into the application with the exception of the support. Mr. Laux is on the line if there's any questions. And again, this application is not on for a recommendation this evening, simply to gather public input.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from council in regards to this application? I've got no, oh, Councillor Fody, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. Maybe I should direct this to our Director of Planning. The most startling thing that jumps off this application is the fact that the reduction or the setback is less than 20% of what our current requirements are. That's a pretty startling reduction. Any comments?
Only that the applicant has prepared an engineering study that's looked at the rationale, looked at the locations on the property for the siting of the system. And we have circulated it to the Ministry of Environment. It's an existing lot of record, so ideally you do want to find a way to allow the lot to be developed. We're working with the Ministry of Environment, who at this point in time is satisfied with the information that's been prepared, as well as the planning rationale. What we have to look at is what was the intent of the policies of the official plan with respect to the setbacks in the previous zoning amendment, and is that intent being met, and any impacts of reducing that setback be mitigated. And at this point, the information that we've been provided indicates that it can all be addressed. However, we haven't finalized a recommendation yet.
Follow up.
Thank you, Your Worship. Have we had any recent comment from Cataraqui Regional Conservation Authority?
Through Your Worship, yes, we have, and they have no concerns with respect to the application and the proposal based on the information that's been submitted.
Okay, thank you.
Any further comments or questions in regards to this application? Okay, Councillor Maybe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To Councillor Fody's, oops, isn't that crazy? Councillor Fody's point is that the rest of the lake is all developed the same way. All the cottages are just roughly the same distance back, as well as the elevation of the rockland to the waterfront. And that this is for a septic bed that is one of the newer designs, which will actually help protect our environment a little better up there also. So that's what I see now out of the topographical maps.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the public? I have no hands up on the Zoom meeting. If there's no additional comments or questions from council, then we'll move on to adjournment. Okay, so motion comes forward from Councillor Fody, seconded by Councillor Maybe, that the public meeting adjourn at 6:34. All those in favor? All those opposed? And we're carried. Okay, we're just going to flip over to the regular meeting. Thank you.